And now, Deborah Kobylt Live.
Hi, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today for Deborah Kobylt Live. I've got such an exciting guest with me today, Lynne Twist, author of The Soul of Money. Lynne, thank you so much for being here. I'm so appreciative you took the time out.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm delighted to have a conversation with you.
I want to inspire so many people to pick up this book that I know you wrote some time ago, but it's been reissued a few times, and it never gets old. It only gets more significant, this book. It really does. You're also the founder of the Soul of Money Institute, which we will get into, the Hunger Project, and the Pachamama Alliance, which is really beautiful. It's a way that you've immersed yourself into giving back, someone who was fortunate enough to have so much. So very often I like to start with that. Let's talk a little bit about the book, The Soul of Money. What is it about it, if you will, and why did you decide to write this book, The Soul of Money?
Well, it's sort of a little bit of a trick title because it sounds like I think money has a soul, and I don't think that, but I know that we do, you do, I do, the people who are listening do, and we give soul to money. We can have money be an expression, an extension of our most soulful desires for the world and for ourselves. But money is a very, very tricky area in people's lives. Most people are upset in their relationship with money. They feel wrong and bad and anxious and like they did something wrong. Even people with billions of dollars have that kind of baggage. So in the kind of journey that I've had, I've been fundraising since I was 5 years old. I've raised hundreds of millions and probably billions of dollars. And I learned a lot, and I've also been a philanthropist, but I really learned all my lessons about money through fundraising, which I consider to be almost holy work, the facilitation of the reallocation of the world's resources away from fear and towards what we love, away from defense and overconsumption and the destruction of the environment, to have those financial resources get reallocated to the things we care about, the preservation of our environment, the health and well-being of our families, our communities, and the health and well-being of all children of all species for all time. So for I don't know, since I was a little girl, I've been kind of helping to reallocate money away from fear towards love. And that has taught me a lot about people's relationship with money. So I wrote a book about it.
5 years old. What were you doing fundraising at 5? Was it Girl Scout cookies? What was going on at the age of 5? I'm very impressed.
There's a little story there. I was in kindergarten in Evanston, Illinois, and our school, grade school, primary school, my older sister was going to be the star of the school play, and there was a huge budget crisis. This is a long time ago. And I remember I was in kindergarten, and after school, my sister came running home. Her name's Holly. She's very dramatic. She was going to be the star of the school play. But they told her that there would be no sets and no costumes in the sixth grade play
Oh
because
my.
there was a budget crisis. And she was just, in tears. She imagined a whole thing around herself, sets and costumes. So I heard her sobbing in my mother's lap. So I went back to school the next day to my kindergarten class, and I made a little plea to my teacher, Miss Edna. And I said, let's raise the money for the school play. I don't know where that came from, but I did. And so we made chocolate chip cookies and lemonade, and we had little lemonade and chocolate chip cookie stands on the four corners of the school every day and all weekend and over again until we had enough money to pay for the sets and costumes for the school play. And we couldn't add, we couldn't subtract, we couldn't read, couldn't write. It was the beginning of kindergarten, but we could raise money. And it shamed the whole school and the PTA, the Board of Education. So they got so inspired, they got out of their budget crisis and did a big
Oh.
fundraising campaign, and it started with kindergartner. So that's sort of that's where I learned that raising money is an act of love. It's not this nasty thing you do, to force people to give money. No, it's an act of love, moving money towards what you love. So that's the
But
story.
also you were enormously successful. You have 3 children. You're in San Francisco. Your husband's enormously successful. Pardon me. And one day you woke up and thought, this isn't quite going the way I thought, right? Like, what was that pivotal point where you almost became that kindergartner again and said, we got to start giving some of this back, or this isn't quite what I envisioned what to do with my money. Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, when we were young parents, Bill was being more successful than we were ready for financially, I'm
Okay.
saying. And so we started sort of thinking we needed to know about wine and we needed to know about art, and we shouldn't go to Yosemite, we should go to Provence. And we started being kind of seduced into a lifestyle that wasn't really authentic for us. It was kind of like what you were supposed to do when you're starting to have money. And I realized I'm off. This isn't us. Those things are wonderful. We love wine, we love art, and we love Provence. But it was false at that point in our life. And it was the Est Training, if you remember that. There was something called EST, the Est Training. It's now called Landmark Education. And I took that course, and it just hit me over the head like a two by four. And I realized I'm being inauthentic. This isn't me. We've lost our way. I was never with my kids. I was always trying to get the right designer outfit for the next whatever. And then I realized that was so inauthentic is the actual term I must use for it, because we were chasing rather than living. We were aspiring. We were trying to impress people. And so I took this course. It really woke me up, and I realized, wait a minute, we have exactly what we need. We have enough. Our goal needs to be with these kids, these beautiful three little children. Our goal is to make the world a better place. Our goal is to make a difference with all this rather than try to, accumulate more and be cooler than the next couple. And I really credit the S Training for that. It's
Mm.
called the Landmark Education Corporation. They do these wonderful programs called the Forum. But it really did wake me up. And, some people meditate, or they have a religious experience, or they fall off a cliff, or they get cancer. I took a course, and it woke me up and really changed my life. And that is also the source of the Hunger Project, which I want to make sure I say I did not found. I'm not a founder of that, so I want to
No, no,
correct
no.
you.
Okay.
I was an early executive. It was founded by Werner Erhard, John Denver, and Bob Fuller, and Buckminster Fuller, the great Bucky Fuller, was a very important part of it. And I was there at the beginning, but I wasn't the founder. But it swept me off my feet, and it became, my life's work for many, many years. So I credit the Est Training, Buckminster Fuller, who I write about in my book, if you've gotten to that part, and then the work of ending world hunger for really discovering the real power of living a life of meaning, living a life of purpose, and having money be something that enhances the choices you make rather than the point of life or the thing you're trying to go after.
Now more than ever, I always like to say to my kids, same problem, different century, same problem, different decade, right? You can go back centuries and decades, and there's always some sort of pushback, right? Good versus bad, whatever. And in this case, that's why I say this book is relevant and pertinent 100 years from now. This is a very valuable book, and I read all of it, of course, and I always do. But I love this chapter 8. When we give our energy to a different dream, the world is transformed. To create a new world, we must first create a new dream. Can you explain what you mean by, well, those weren't your words, but could you explain that, like how that touched you? The words of John Perkins, would you?
Well, that kind of leads me into the work I do now with the
Yeah.
Pachamama Alliance, because through a whole set of mystical circumstances, which would take me more than our time to explain, I ended up in a shamanic ceremony in Central America that led me to go to the Amazon rainforest with John Perkins, and also my husband Bill came too. And that started this work called the Pachamama Alliance. And just to make sure people understand, Pachamama means Mother Earth. It's a Quechua word, indigenous word. And the Pachamama Alliance is an alliance between the indigenous people of the rainforest, particularly the sacred headwaters region of the rainforest, the Amazon rainforest, and conscious, committed people in the modern world like you and all the listeners to this program. And the indigenous people, so the source of that statement, or that what you read, is that the indigenous people have told us very, very clearly that we in the modern world, we all know we're off course, obviously, And they know that we're caught in what they call a trance of consumerism, a trance of more, 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 a trance of, we've got to have this, we've got to have that. And we're destroying the very life support system on which we depend, and we're kind of destroying each other. And they can see that. They're not caught in it. They don't make us wrong for it. They have compassion for us, actually. And what their advice or their guidance, and actually the real truth is was a mandate when we first had our first encounter with the Achuar people, who were the indigenous group that we began with. They said you actually can't change your everyday actions. They will always line up with your dream. What we need to do is change the dream of the modern world. A dream that's rooted in consumption and acquisition and taking more than we need and kind of eating everything up. We need to change the dream, because once we have a new dream, it will reach back and inform our everyday actions. And so they told us to change the dream of the modern world. That was a mandate. Go home and change the dream of the modern world, because what's destroying the rainforest and what's destroying you is your dream. Redream the future. And so we've created a program called Awakening the Dreamer. But the mission is to bring forth an environmentally sustainable, spiritually fulfilling, socially just human presence on this planet as the new dream for humanity. And when you're rooted in that new dream, an environmentally sustainable, spiritually fulfilling, socially just human presence on this planet, it makes you rethink the way you're living, and you take different actions. It's an amazing, powerful thing to change the dream that you're living in.
How do you get to that point? So many people are stuck in and still, even though, clearly there are signs out there like, you got to slow down, you got to stop. How do you get to the point, that pivotal point where you make the change or decide, like you did, I don't need that extra dress and I don't have to go to Provence. I'm happy to take a road trip. It's just as exciting, if not maybe even more, in my own yard. Learn more about how I can do things here. How can you get to that point when you're so sucked into that vortex of living what you think is an exciting life? How do you do that?
Well,
that's hard.
I think it's really hard, and it's not easy, and it's not obvious, because we think the dream that we have is the right one. So one thing you can do is take the Pachamama Alliance Changing the Dream program, which is designed to help us relinquish the dream that's no longer healthy for us and dream our future. So that's one thing. But it's also, I just got to say that you're asking me that at a time. I don't know when we'll talk about this, but I'm going to bring it up now. This situation we're in, called the pandemic. The shamans and elders in the rainforest say that we've been longing for this, praying for this, and that this is something powerful enough and sacred enough to stop us from destroying the very life support system on which we depend, and in so doing, destroying the capacity for life itself and destroying each other. And that we couldn't do it ourselves. We were too locked into the systems, the structures that are all designed to have us take and consume and want more. And so they say that the virus, which is a terrible scourge, and people are dying and sick, and I don't want to step over that. At the same time, they call it not a punishment, but an ally for a species that's lost its way. And I would say, so to know that, to hear those words, hopefully for people who are listening, but when I heard them, I started to rethink what this is and why this is here. And perhaps it's not happening to us, it's happening for us. And when you hold it that way, then you start rethinking, resetting, rebooting, reimagining life. So I think the virus, as terrible as it is an ally for that you're asking. And then another thing I'll say is the Soul of Money work is to do exactly that. That's what we do at our institute. We do programs that have people disaggregate, let's say, free themselves, liberate themselves from the traps, the mindset, the narratives that have them on a rat race, just trying to get more and more and more and more and building up so much stuff. Even people who have very little money, that they're swimming in stuff and have no expression and a sense of their inner life. They're living in a deficit in their inner life and trying to fill it with outer resources rather than finding the infinite richness of the inner life. And so that's what we do at Soul of Money Institute, actually. So there's a parallel here with the Pachamama Alliance, the Soul of Money Institute, the virus, and your question.
And your book, because you can really pick up this book and learn so much depending upon what's going on in your life, right? Different chapters hit you at a different time. I know that happened to me. Look at what's going on here in California with the fires, right? I mean, to your point with the rainforest, look what's happening here. I think it's becoming more clear, I hope, that the practices that went on centuries before are the practices that we need to really listen to and understand, because they knew, those who came before us, the modern world, knew how to navigate the land here. And we came in and did it our own way, and it's not necessarily working. Regardless if it's a lightning strike or even if it's arson, God forbid, the management of things.
Yes.
We've decided not to listen to those who came before us. And I'm hoping, to your point, that people realize, I think we have to stop and pivot and take a moment. Mm-hmm. And you know, what do you say about that, about what's happening here? It's devastating.
I would underline that completely. It's actually, you know, the Amazon is on fire now too. And this is the fire season here in California, where you and I are, but it's also the fire season, unfortunately, in the Amazon. Some of the fires are natural and appropriate to forest management. But because we have not honored that in so long, since the original people were here, who really did actually understand the natural world, because for them it's part of their body. It's not like they live in the forest, they are the forest. So you're completely right about that. And this is a real comeuppance. It's like a huge awakening. I consider it, actually, I consider this a birth canal, that we're just realizing we have morning sickness. You've had children, so you remember when you first are pregnant and you don't know you're pregnant, you think there's something wrong with you because you feel sick and nauseous and you sleep all the time. You're eating kind of weird foods. You're a little bit crabby. And then you find out you're pregnant and there's a context. There's a framework. Suddenly this is a blessing. Suddenly this is wonderful. Suddenly throwing up in the morning means you're going to have a baby instead of there's something wrong with you. So we need a context for what's happening right now. And I call it morning sickness, the birth of a new civilization. And it's going to be a long, difficult pregnancy. And it's going to be a co-laboring, collaborative pregnancy. Men will get involved too in this pregnancy, in this birth canal. And I think it's going to be painful. I think there's going to be a lot of labor pains. I don't know how long it's going to be, but in many ways, if we hold it, that this is the beginning of a birth. It's the job now, maybe, I recommend, this is my view, is to hospice the death of the old structures and systems that no longer serve us, because they're unsustainable. They are dying. They are collapsing. They are falling apart, and that's a good thing. And we can hospice their natural death. It's time for them to go. And when you hospice something, it dies with dignity and it dies faster, while we midwife the birth of the new structures and systems that we now understand are consistent with a human future that's sustainable, that's loving, that's collaborative, that honors all people and all species. And so hospicing and midwifing are both acts of love and acceptance and allowing something to come through. Just like a pregnancy is. So I feel that's really what's happening now. And I think it's a holy time and it's a painful time. But we are in some sort of a huge transformation. And the baby might not be born. There are stillborns. There are miscarriages. There are babies born dead or deformed. We need to ensure the health and well-being of whatever it is that's coming, and to let go of that which no longer serves us. So I think
go ahead. Well, we talked about that a little bit, and I said, gosh, we almost have to start over. I mean, look what's happening. Look at all of the separation in our society, in our own country. politically, socially. There's so many issues tearing us apart. This presidential election, it clearly it's very important to your point. What do you say about the great separation happening in our society? How can we come together? Because there's those who hear your message, and then there are those who say, "Oh, let's just move to 2021. It'll be better." It's like, no, 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 no. That's not the point. There's things that we have to learn from this and move. Do you see what I mean? How do you move forward when you have those who just want to get it over with, and then those who want to do it in a certain way so that it moves us forward to better where we've been. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Well, I kind of have two answers to that. The first
Sure.
is that it's a metaphor, a story that I think you probably know, and many people have heard that this is an evolutionary biological interpretation. So when a caterpillar reaches a certain point of its own life cycle, its own evolutionary life cycle, it starts to consume and consume and consume and consume. And one little brown fuzzy caterpillar can consume the leaves on an entire tree. They eat hundreds of times their own weight at a certain point in their evolutionary journey. When they're that fat, overweight little brown monster, inside the caterpillar's body, there's something that happens called the imaginal cells. Imaginal cells, like spelled like imagine, that wake up, and their job is to find each other, to cluster. And that's what your program is about. This is a cluster opportunity for imaginal cells. If enough of them cluster, they don't become the majority of the caterpillar cells, but if there's some magic number, if enough of them cluster, then the other cells turn into a nutritive soup, out of which the imaginal cells create the absolute unpredictable miracle of a butterfly. So that metaphor is about your show and you. That metaphor is about the work that I'm doing. That metaphor is about the people who are awake on this planet. We need to find each other and redream our civilization, our species, our life. We don't need to be in the majority. We don't need to take over. It's not like that.
Yeah.
But it is to be awake and aware. And Marianne Williamson, the wonderful, she's a wonderful friend of mine, and I had a call with her the other day, and she said, Lynne, she said, the rehearsals are over. The curtain is up. It's time for the show. Then she also said the data is in. We don't need any more data. We got so much information. We're drowning in it. What we need now is wisdom. So the second part of the answer to your question is, I say this is the Sophia century. This is the book I'm writing now. And the word Sophia refers to wisdom, and particularly feminine divine wisdom. And I say that this is the first century of the third millennium. This is the first of another 1,000 years. So we completed year 2000. Now we're in the first 100 years of the third millennium. And many, many prophecies have called the 21st century a prophetic century. I call it the Sophia century, the century when women will take our rightful role in co-equal partnership with men, and the whole world will come into balance. And the masculine and feminine will come into balance. And there's a prophecy, a Baha'i prophecy, that says the 21st century is the time when, I'm going to go back, the bird of humanity, they say the bird of humanity has two wings, a male wing and a female wing. And the male wing has been fully extended and fully expressed for centuries. And in fact, the female wing has not been fully expressed for centuries. It's been truncated and folded in. So the male wing has gotten overdeveloped, over-muscular, and has had to become nearly violent in order to keep the bird of humanity afloat. And so we've been flying in circles for hundreds and hundreds of years. And the 21st century, says the prophecy, is when the female wing in all of us will fully extend. The male wing in all of us can relax, and for the first time in hundreds of years, the bird of humanity will soar. So those two stories, the caterpillar and the butterfly, the bird of humanity, for me are the two answers to your question. One is that the imaginal cells need to find each other and create the new world, and know that it's okay that not everybody's doing that. They'll become the nutritive soup. That's what their role will be. And it's okay
Hmm.
for them to oppose and be angry and do all the complaining they're doing. We're not going to change that. The other metaphor of the bird is that the feminine energy, the female archetype, the feminine in all of us, men and women, is now bursting to be expressed, rising in all of us. You could say that the current administration is the last throes of the patriarchy in its most grotesque and exaggerated form. Misogyny and blaming and finger pointing and kind of ugliness that's it's just almost like unbearable, to show the patriarchy's darkest shadow so that we transform it and let it go. You could say that that's actually what's happening, so that the feminine in all of us can begin to rise, that wisdom, that passion, that love, that collaboration, that partnership model, all of that is ready to be reborn, or be probably born for the first time in the fullness that it can be. So those are my two stories and my two answers to your question.
You can see that it takes a long time, though, right? It really, we need patience through generations, right? It was 100 years ago that we were finally given the right to vote, right? So we finally were able to legally step up to do something. So it's been 100 years, and I feel like we've made so much progress. Of course, there's always more to be made. There always will be, but little step by step. To your point, you can't change everything, nor do you want to. But by getting your message out, one person at a time, one vote at a time, there's your difference, right?
Right.
There's how you make your difference. And you're right. You're so spot on with that, Lynne. Tell me, who are some of the people who truly inspire you? I know that you spend time with Oprah, who's incredibly inspired. I loved her interview with you as well, and how she spoke about money and her views on money.
Mm.
Because it's not about how much you have, as we know, it's how you're inspired to use your money. And right, could you explain that to us a little more? But anyway, a little more about your relationship with Oprah and some others that have inspired you in time.
Well, I think I see on the screen, I don't know if everybody sees it, I spent time with Mother Teresa. You can't get better than that. She was just really everything you would want her to be, and then some. I was lucky enough to, really kneel at her feet, as you can see in that photograph when I was a young woman. So she became an icon for all of us, and a real icon for me. And I've always been deeply moved by His Holiness. There was another picture of that. This is my friend Van Jones, who's a CNN reporter now, but he's also the head of and the creator of Cut 50 about prison system. He helped pass the criminal justice bill. He's founded the Ella Baker Center. He's the head of the Dream Corps. He's head of Reform Alliance. He's just a very, very inspiring leader. And a friend, and then His Holiness the Dalai Lama. What a privilege to have had a little bit of time with him over the years that I've been lucky enough to know him, and know him as I don't want to say it in any disrespectful way, to be a student of one of the great spiritual teachers on the planet, and Desmond Tutu as well. But I'll say I'm super inspired by Jane Goodall. She's 10 years older than I
Oh,
am. She's still as strong and feisty and fierce and trustworthy as anyone on earth. I love being with Oprah, and anything I can ever do for her. Who can ever do enough for Oprah Winfrey, what she's done for this world. Maya Angelou was a great teacher for
mm,
me. Toni Morrison, so many Black women. And I've had, these are people who are famous, but I've had the great privilege of working with women with my hands in the dirt in Ghana, in Senegal, in Ethiopia, in India, in Bangladesh, and with indigenous peoples of the Amazon, who are amazing shamans like Minari Ushiwa, healers like Arkan Lushwala, indigenous leaders, women leaders like Patricia Walinga, and Isabel Wisum. These are amazing and not famous, but people who live in circumstances that you and I would consider harsh or difficult, and yet they're so incredibly wise and strong and visionary. And the circumstances being harsh almost supports that in them, kind of forces a kind of inner work that our comfortable lifestyles here, and I know everybody doesn't have that, but I'm talking to you and I can see that you do, and I know you do, and maybe some of the listeners who can take the time to listen to this, doesn't always produce the kind of inner strength because we don't need it so much. We've got all this other stuff to take care of us that these people have. And so the most powerful teachers I've had, to tell you the honest God truth, are people that I used to call poor. And I would never call them poor anymore because
No.
what's poor is their circumstances, not them. And they are courageous. These people living in conditions of hunger and poverty and war, especially the women, courageous, unbelievably brave, unbelievably strong, unbelievably connected to their families, and with the capacity for immense joy. I'm thinking of African women dancing to drums and yet facing just, how am I going to feed my kids for the next, month? So I feel so fortunate that I've had a path that's taking me to places where people are living in circumstances of poverty, circumstances of oppression, and circumstances of war. Rather than being depressed by that, I am so privileged to know people that I could name to you who are unbelievable and intelligent. They may not know how to read or write because no one taught them, but they're so brilliant and live so consistent with their humanity and exhibit more courage to live through one day than you and I are going to need in our lifetime. So those are my true heroes.
It's interesting because so many people living in America who grew up the American way, which is wonderful, who maybe have not had the privilege to travel, don't realize that when you step out of America and you go to places that are much less, the entire country has much less. You're absolutely correct. Those people are joyful and happy because the spirit comes from within. It's not necessarily what they have. Would they want a better pair of shoes? Well, of course. But that joy, that soul, it doesn't change. And that's something, I almost wish that people would have the opportunity to travel, or at least, watch programming, good programming about the way others live around the world. You mentioned Jane Goodall. I loved her as a tiny, tiny little kid. And I thought what was wonderful was how she put, if you will, a face to animals. They're not animals. We coexist with these creatures. We're creatures, they're creatures. And we coexist. We have a different language, a different way to communicate. But I love how she really, she changed the way so many people have looked at animals. Mm-hmm. And what those are doing in the rainforest and out in our own forest in California and beyond. There's so many great teachers like yourself. We're not in this alone.
Yes.
And that's what I got from your book and from you. We're not in this alone. Yes. And even if we're a minority, that's okay too, right? It's okay.
Well, the minorities that we used to call minorities are clearly majorities. I mean, one of the things that's so clear to me is that this, since the George Floyd horrendous situation, and Armand Arbery and Michael Brown and Terrence Crutchner and Tatiana Jefferson and Betty Jones and Trayvon Martin and Laquan McDonald, Tamir Rice, Breonna Taylor, Dominic White. I like to say more names than just George, although George's death really tipped the scales.
Stunning.
We now are really facing white supremacy and white supremacists, and really understanding white supremacy, I think, is the key to breaking open the relationship that we need with one another. I really, really am so inspired by the aperture. I know it's tough and there's demonstrations and suffering, but there's an opening that I think is really important. And Martin Luther King, I think, would be, is up there cheering, So I think we're in a very, let's say, vulnerable in a good way space. People are realizing, oh God, was that racist? Or God, do I really think that? All of that, even for the most hardened, is healthy and tough. And that's a big part of what I think is, when you say minority and majority, I think we'll find out soon the United States is going to be way more brown and black and Asian people than it is Caucasians, and so that term won't be accurate any longer, and it isn't accurate worldwide anyway. So
By minority and majority, I meant the way one thinks. You know,
yes,
sometimes you think that way, you're in the minority, but in fact, that's okay to think
yes.
in a minority. But right, that's what I meant by that.
Okay, well, good. Well, that gave me an opportunity to say all that stuff. Then,
Yeah,
thanks.
but just so you know, I meant some people who feel the way you do, the way I do, and so many of the people that you mentioned, we might be in a minority, but we're in a position to hopefully let more people understand how we feel about what is happening in our world, in our environment, in our world. That's what I meant by that.
Yes.
It's funny. I grew up in a situation. My parents were Italian and didn't particularly make much money, but they were hardworking, and we were kind of colorblind completely. I think maybe that was rare for them. So growing up and working as a journalist, I thought, gosh, this is unbelievable. My own eyes were opened up, because I always feel like just peel back the layer of your skin. We're all the same. We're the same.
Oh,
Um,
good.
I might feel that way, but getting that across is difficult.
Yeah.
Um, how can people learn more about your philosophy and the teachings and all the places you've been? How can they get more in touch? What can they learn when they go to your institute, for example? Um,
My institute, soulofmoney.org, soul of money, just like it sounds, SOULOFMONEY.org. We have programs for women. We have something called the Awakening Women program. Next year, we'll have Sophia Century Circles for women. We have trainings for fundraisers, fundraising from the heart, it's called. We have Soul of Money programs that really unleash people's souls. We work with wealth managers and people who are looking at their philanthropic ways of being and impact investing, all that stuff. So that's at thesoulofmoney.org. And then Pachamama.org, Pachamama, Pachamama, all one word. We do programs, educational online programs in really awesome programs, actually. I got to say, I don't create them, so I can say they are so good. And they're in 88 countries, in 16 languages, about changing the dream of the modern world, about changing the game that we're caught in, Game Changer Intensive, it's called. And then Drawdown, which is about reversing global warming, which is actually possible
it
and
is.
what we must do. And then we have a whole series called Resilience and Possibility, which is about how to stay the course in this difficult time, how to be
Mm.
resilient, how to keep possibility alive. So, Pachamama Alliance, Pachamama.org, soulofmoney.org. And then the third track is the Nobel Women's Initiative. And the Nobel women are the women who won the Nobel Peace Prize that have come together to create an initiative that supports, it uses the cachet, the visibility, the power of the Nobel Prize, which they received, and they're absolutely amazing. They won the Nobel Prize, so obviously they're amazing. To support and bring press like your wonderful voice and your eyes and your contacts to grassroots women's struggles on the ground in countries that are off the radar, like Syria, Yemen, Democratic Republic of Congo, where rape is just out of sight, and child soldiering and sexual torture and horrible things that most people don't want to even know about, so that we start to realize the magnitude of the responsibilities we have for our human family, and that we can make a difference. So that's the Nobel Women's Initiative, nobelwomen'sinitiative.org. So nobelwomen'sinitiative.org, soulofmoney.org, pachamama.org, and then you're giving me the opportunity to say this thing I'm going to say, that on November 19th, we're
Mm.
having a very, very important online global community gathering, which will really, it's from the Pachamama Alliance, which will really address the status of the world after the election, November 19th, the status of the whole world, of course, with some attention on the United States, wherever we are then, and how to move into the next era of the human family in a way that we retain our soul, our integrity, our commitment to a sustainable future for everyone. And there'll be Indigenous people at this event. It'll be a very important event. So I just wanted to say that, November 19th.
I love that, the human family. How do you look at us compared to animals? That might seem kind of like a, what is she saying? Like, for example, when I look at the way animals relate to each other and they're young, small animals, large animals, I sometimes feel like they've got it right and we're the ones who have it wrong because we're the ones who are living off the land and being irresponsible, and they're living the way they should. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like we can learn so much if we
Mm.
study animals, all animals, and just learn how they care for their families.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. You're right on because animals, and I'll include the natural world, even plants, because
Mm,
you know, animals don't take more than they need unless they're domesticated. Then they get,
exactly right.
you know, chickens that are big fat chickens and they can't even
Right.
walk.
And where's my treat? It's that
Yeah.
kind of thing. Yeah.
So they don't take more than they need. They can't even imagine it. I mean, not that they, I don't know if they imagine it or not, but they are beings. They are souls. I'll tell you another quick story. I was walking through the Amazon rainforest in Zapara territory in the Ecuadorian Amazon behind a shaman named Minari. And
Hmm.
he was walking, he was barefooted. It's the jungle, you know, it's like he's got a machete and he's cutting the trail. There's no trail. He's just cutting trail. I'm walking behind him. At one point, he stops in his bare feet and his feathers and beautiful, beautiful, big, handsome indigenous man. He's a shaman and great a leader. And he turned around and said to me in Spanish, "Do you feel them?" And thought, "Is there somebody here besides us?"
Hmm.
And I said, "I don't understand." He said, "No. Do you feel them?" And I said, "Who? What?" And he said, "The millions and millions of souls. They're all around us." And I can't tell you what happened for me then because I
Wow.
started to experience that the leaves had souls, the trees had souls, the ants, the little termites, the birds, you know, the critters, all they all had souls. For him, they had souls.
Yeah.
And
I
I,
feel that. I get it. I get
yeah,
that.
it was just I felt then suddenly I was one with the whole world. It was a transmission and a transformational experience for me. I'll never forget it. Changed me, changed the very way probably the way my molecules operate in my own body. It was that profound.
Hmm.
So yes, I think animals have a lot to teach us. They never take more than they need. They collaborate. They prey on each other and they collaborate. They give themselves over. They sacrifice for each other, as does the forest. The forest is a beautiful teacher. We have so much to learn, and there is a whole science called biomimicry, which
Hmm.
is imitating nature to find our way through. So yes, yes, yes to what you just said.
Imitating nature to find our way through. That's very valuable. People, please pick up The Soul of Money and the other books that you're working on, the other book you're working on. When will that be at? And what do you touch upon there?
Well, the one I'm working on now, it'll be a while because it takes a while to get these things to happen. But
Of course.
it's about the Sophia century, and it's about the rise of Sophia and how that women can transform the world, especially now.
Hmm.
And the other book is really a memoir called A Committed Life,
Hmm.
and it's really about the commitments I've made and how a committed life what I how I define that is that I'm managed or I'm governed by my commitments, not my desires. And so my desires have faded into the background. And what wakes me up in the morning, what gives me these innate, enormous relationships I have that I shared with you, and the capacity and opportunity and privilege of being on your show is the commitments I've made. It's taken me all over the world. It took me to the feet of Mother Teresa. It's had me spend, you know, weeks at a time with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So my commitments have given me a life I could never have dreamed of. And if I followed my desires, that would have been quite different. It's not that I don't have them, but they're in the background and my commitments are in the foreground. And that's given me a life of extraordinary meaning, blessing, and joy.
When you talk about when he said to you, do you feel them behind you? Do you feel it? I feel that talking to you. All the people you've met, all the experience, I feel them coming through you talking to me. I need you to know that. And that's very sincere. So I appreciate that very, very much. So please, everyone, look up. First of all, the book is phenomenal. I keep it by my bedside, and I'll tell you why. There's always something I can pick up and refer to. I've been talking to one of my sons about it in particular. He likes doing archaeological work, and he's very attracted to the book. But there's so much that we can all learn from it. Please also go out and vote this November. That's very important. The future really, really is critical. Look up the Soul of Money Institute, the Hunger Project.
Yes, very important.
Yeah, if you want to say a word about that before I let you go. And of course, the Pachamama Alliance as well. Did you want to say a word about the Hunger Project very quickly?
I learned so much about what I've shared with you from the Hunger Project. So I just want to honor the Hunger Project. It's still going. It's a fabulous organization, and there's lots of juicy stuff on that website too.
Right. There's so many ways to get involved. I suggest just looking up Lynne Twist. Get to know a little bit about what happened in her life to sort of transfer, where she ended up now, where she has a life of purpose as opposed to a life of wants. I think that's very important. If we can just give ourselves a day, maybe, a week, a month, just see what that feels like on the inside in your soul, to see how that can change you and the people around you. Thank you very much. Lynne Twist, author of The Soul of Money. I'm honored that you took the time to talk to me. I know you are a very, very busy person. So thank you for letting me spread what you do to our audience.
I loved it too. I love being with you. Thank you so much. You're a wonderful interviewer.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for joining us on Deborah Kobylt Live. You can find us on Facebook and YouTube and Instagram and all of the other platforms for the audio podcasts, whether it's Spreaker or iHeart. Just honestly, wherever you get your podcasts, wherever you watch them, you'll find us. So please look up Lynne Twist and Deborah Kobylt Live. And thank you so much again, Lynne, for joining us. And to all of our listeners and sponsors, have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.